Hi, I'm Evan, and for my project, I did a little poem, put on in the collage as a background. So basically, the poem goes: white noise, smoke and mirrors, fed to us by strangers, demagogues and pseudo gods preaching from their perches, people talking without speaking, people listening without hearing. If I swallow anything evil, put your fingers down my throat. I'll let you tend to your garden, and you let me tend to mine. So their inspiration for my poem and the corresponding artwork was just, like, I guess, basically a rejection of today's like political culture. Like everything's polarized. We're kind of expected to have opinion on everything, which creates like a lot of division. And specifically, the poem and the artwork is kind of a rejection of like the gatekeepers of society, as discussed in the first reading of the semester, I believe, by Nato Thompson. And basically, the background is just a bunch of newspapers clippings, which I see them as like a gatekeeper of society. Like they decide what's news, what's not news, what's legitimate, like what's worth talking about, which I think is like kind of like, obviously they can use that for their own biases, and that creates a lot of problems, especially in today's day and age of social media. Like a lot of people don't trust the media, and like rightly so, in my opinion. So basically, I got the inspiration from, I guess, most of it from the Nino Thompson reading. And then my poem goes on to say, if I swallow anything evil, put your fingers down my throat. That's in reference to just like, if I give any legitimacy to these gatekeepers, then that's what keeps like their like lies and like other issues that continue to go on. Because like these gatekeepers are only legitimized because we give it to them as the public. And it kind of like gatekeep, like they I guess like the mass media and politics can lead to like some pretty bad things. Like for instance, like the war on drugs led to the rise of penal populism, and then it also led to which led to mass incarceration that we see today, because they said that as a supposed solution, but it ended up causing just a whole host of problems. So basically, that line is in reference to like, hey, if I ever like fall into the trap of like these gatekeepers, then like help me like resist it. That line is also in reference to the prisoners themselves, because a lot of the time, as discussed in Marking Time by Nicole Fleetwood, there's a lot of like beautiful artwork, and like a lot of like that type of like, even art in general isn't generally associated with your typical conception of a prisoner or inmate. And when prisoners do that, though, it's like a humane attribute. Like, so the public can see them just as humans, and not as like all these bad things these gatekeepers in the mass media tend to portray prisoners as. That line there, and if I swallow anything evil, put your fingers down my throat, it's from a Who song called Behind Blue Eyes. It came out like in the early 70s. And basically that song follows like the plight of the supposed villain, and it kind of like, the song discusses how like, hey, like you have to kind of consider the villain's point of view sometimes too. And in today's society, the common villain is the prisoner or the inmate, which, as discussed in Nicole Fleetwood's reading, like they can actually have some pretty like good characteristics though, and they're like not generally always all that bad. Additionally, my last line, I'll let you tend to your garden and you let me tend to mine, is just a reference to Voltaire's Candide novel, which basically it follows the protagonist Candide as he sails around the world, and he has a very optimistic outlook at the start of the book, but then towards the end he kind of like realizes the world's a pretty shitty place. But at the end of the book, he meets this guy in Turkey, outside of Istanbul, who just tends to his own garden and lives in his own little world. And basically the guy kind of conveys to him, hey, like you have to cultivate your own garden. And Candide really takes that away with him. He's like, hey, I have to focus on my own issues and like not be so caught up in today's like issues. And like that pretty much like sums up my whole entire artwork and poem, basically to say like, hey, like not everything has to be so political. We don't always have to listen to these gatekeepers of society, which can have some pretty dire consequences. So, yeah.